Hey guys, this is John, and I'm playing Knightley in the 15-minute pool in ICC. So Knightley opens with c4. Let me just think what I want to play against this. Previously, I played b6. That was pretty interesting. Let's go c6 this time around. As a Slav player, I have the luxury of playing this move, preparing d5. So if they play d4, we're just transposing directly back into a Slav. But he chooses a fianchetto setup. The way that they're supposed to play this is gambit the c4 pawn. So in this position, play knight f3. It is possible to play safer, like b3 for instance, but knight f3 is the critical move, after which I'll probably take the pawn. This is what I like to do. And if they're not interested in winning the pawn back right away, which they shouldn't necessarily be, they can play castles. Yeah, and now knight bd7 is the main move. We'll do that. Usually they play queen c2 or knight a3 now. And sometimes those two moves can transpose. Queen c2 is slightly more flexible in that after knight b6, he could play knight a3 or c4, or a4, I should say. So he plays knight a3 and just attacks the pawn. I will defend it. Now after queen c2, I usually play g6. It's like maybe not the most active move in the world, but I have plenty of experience in this line. I played this line OTB, so I am going to play it. Now bishop e6. Let's just check Knightley's stats. He has a peak 15-minute rating of 2032. Played lots and lots of games. Okay, so queen h4. This is an interesting move I've never seen before. It makes sense to some degree. I mean, he might be trying to play d3 and put the bishop on h6 later. I don't immediately see any huge drawback to playing this move. Let's go bishop g7 as normal. If he plays d3, I'm thinking I might want to go h6 with an eye towards playing g5. Because let's say d3, I just were to castle. Then he gets to play bishop h6 as planned. That's not really in my favor. It's not terrible either, but it's too easy for him to play, I guess is what I mean. So let's disrupt his plans and play h6. This is something that can happen in an opening called, well, it's a double fianchetto opening in knight f3 or c4 on move 1 as well. Trying to figure out how to describe the line. But basically there's a line where black fianchettos on the queen side, and if white tries to play an early queen h4, then black does the same thing. They play h6 before castling. Okay, knight d4, so they're attacking this bishop. If I play g5, then they have knight takes e6 in between move, hitting my queen. So I should move this bishop. The question is where? d7 or c8, or even g4. g4 is interesting. If bishop g4, I'm attacking this knight straight away, and also g5 becomes possible. Oh yeah, I like the look of that. If I play bishop g4, attacking their knight, that might encourage them to play knight takes c6. Okay, this looks good. So I'm thinking knight takes c6, b takes c6, bishop takes c6 check, king f8, bishop takes a8, and then I have g5. It's crucial that I have g5, actually, because then he'd have to give up the bishop, and I'm ahead even more material. Actually, his queen is still in jeopardy even after that. But you guys will see what I mean in a second. I'm just going to play this fast, because if the game becomes sharp, I want to have some time that I've banked. So yeah, here, king f8 idea, bishop takes a8, g5, before playing queen takes a8. Yeah, I think this will work out in my favor. If simply bishop takes a8, queen takes a8, that might give him a chance to retreat with his queen, or defend the g5 push, like maybe play f4 or something. I'm sure that's still good for black, but the fact that I have g5 right now is very, very nice for me. Yeah, because queen takes a8, he gives him a chance. He can play that f4 move. I could take on e2 then, but Hey, a piece is a piece. Let's do this. And he must take on g5, so we're going to have a trade. Or rather than a trade, I just win material. Now he has to play queen takes. Do I want to play rook h5 and chase him further, or should I just play queen takes a8? I think I'm probably just going to play queen takes a8. I'm very happy with the amount of material I've just won. I can play rook h5 whenever I want. Might also be useful to keep bishop h6 in my back pocket. Yeah, and he just resigned. Wow, okay, so very quick game. I apologize if you guys were anticipating a longer game. I never know how long or how short these games are going to be. All I know is at max they'll take 30 minutes. But let's have a look. So c4, c6. Good. This is a good line for a Slav player. The only way white can really keep it in truly independent territory is if they play e4, which is really a move to discourage d5. But a lot of players play d5 anyways in this position. And then after e takes d5, c takes d5, c takes d5, black shouldn't play queen takes d5 right away because knight c3 with tempo. But knight f6 is the theoretically approved move. And there's some theory here, but generally black does okay from this position. White can try to hold on to the d-pawn for a little while. So, for instance, bishop b5 check and try to disrupt black's development. So I was prepared for that, but he played g3, d5, bishop g2, knight f6, knight f3. And now the crucial move is to take on c4. There's other moves too, like bishop f5 and bishop g4 are played. Those moves have the drawback in that white can play for an early queen b3. So for instance, like, let's say bishop f5, c takes d5, c takes d5, queen b3. That's often the drawback of developing this bishop too early, is that b7 is weak. So I always prefer to take, although I think I have played other moves here before. There's a lot of stuff possible. In addition to the bishop moves, there's e6, and there's also even g6 is fine for black. Totally playable. So take, he castles. So the reason why white's not too concerned about winning back the pawn is that if black immediately tries to reinforce this pawn with moves like b5, I fall way behind in development. And if you're gambling that pawn on c4, like you shouldn't mind something like this happening. In fact, I think you'd probably look forward to it. You'd start undermining with moves like a4, and it's not worth trying to defend this pawn this early in the game. So in some positions in the semi-Slav, it does make sense to take and try to hold on to the position, or hold on to the pawn, but this line is not one where I would advise black to do that. So take, castle, knight bd7, just a developing move that also allows us to defend this pawn and open up our bishop. So I mentioned that queen c2 is a bit more flexible. If queen c2 and then knight b6, they can throw in a4, trying to chase our knight with a5. But then after a5, knight a3, it's very similar. It's just we've included these moves, which I happen to think this benefits black, the inclusion of these moves, because I feel like b4 is just an extremely weak square now, whereas b5 isn't that weak by virtue of black playing a5. I still have my pawn here guarding it, whereas he can't say the same thing about b4. So I prefer white's move order. Knight a3, knight b6, queen c2. This is a great example of a line that I would play for either side. I would feel comfortable playing this for both white and black. And in fact, I have played this line for white. So take bishop e6. I've only faced queen c2 in this position. And actually, I think I had a 15-minute game against Tony Rotella in this line. If you go back and search the standard archives, where he played queen c2, I believe that's how our game went. Queen h4 I'm not so familiar with. I'm just going to add the engine right here just to begin getting an idea of what it thinks. This move makes sense. It makes perfect sense to do this, but I fear the bishop has, or the queen has been committed to this wing a little bit too early. Oh, if I remember, I'll go back and show you the line that I was comparing this to. So bishop g7, d3, yeah, now h6. So the computer approves of this move. Because if I castle, they get to go bishop h6 in one fell swoop. I'm pretty sure this is their idea. And if possible, they would continue with knight g5, and there would be pressure against h7. Like, let's just say I play some banal move, knight g5, and the only thing stopping me from getting mated is my knight on f6. That makes me a little nervous over here. Even this is probably okay for black, but we prefer to avoid this scenario if possible. So that's why I played h6. Now you might be asking, like, well, how are you going to castle? Let's just say he plays some normal move like bishop d2. Yeah, it might be difficult to castle. I didn't think about this at the time, but knight g4 is a pretty big threat, isn't it? With a similar idea to the game, cutting off his queen and threatening g5. His queen is not able to communicate with the outside world. And g5 would force queen h3 or a sack on g5, both of which will have serious repercussions for white's position. So that's probably why after h6, the engine just says white should get out of there with their queen, queen a4, get out of dodge, and admit that queen h4 didn't really accomplish a whole lot. But instead, he played this pretty quickly, knight d4. But yeah, after bishop g4, he's already essentially busted, it seems. His knight is under attack, g5 is the threat. Those two threats are enough to win the game. Just trying to think if there's anything he can really do. I think the best he can do is sacrifice a piece for 2 pawns when I play g5 and he sacrifices a piece on g5. But even then, that won't be the end of his troubles. Like e2 remains weak, like in this move that the computer's suggesting, knight b3, e2 remains weak. So let's just say g5, bishop takes, queen takes. I guess he is hitting this bishop. Bishop h6, queen e5, defending this pawn. Yeah, and for all intents and purposes, this should just be over. It's a matter of technique for black. So knight d4 was too committal. He should have realized that the noose was tightening around his queen and that he had to evacuate queen a4. So here we get bishop g4 in. He took on c6. I did see this coming.
Check.
But yeah, after this and then g5, it's over. Okay, so the engine does say I can play queen takes a8 as well. I was sort of wondering if he could do this, but apparently this is also more than white's position can tolerate. Let's say rook e1, queen f3. Yikes. Yeah, ideas like knight g4 and a check on f2 or maybe bishop d4. It's devastating. You can see the effect of his queen being out of play. It just kills like any chance at defense he has. But I played g5. Yeah, you're in trouble when the engine says your top move is queen takes g4 here. That's just not what white wants. Queen takes a8, yep. And he just resigned. Not premature. He has a few pawns for it, but the 3 minor pieces easily overpower the rook plus the scattered pawns. How many pawns does he have? He actually has a reasonable amount of pawns. That's kind of funny. Like, he resigned, and I also think this position is absolutely crushing, as does the computer. But if you look at it, it's even material. This number in brackets is the material count. You could also just count on the board. But yeah, he's up 4 pawns. So he has 4 pawns plus a rook. That's 9 points versus my 3 minor pieces, which is also 9 points. So why is it so winning for black? Well, it's because my activity is just enormous here. I'm threatening bishop h3, threatening mate on g2. He can play that f3 move to defend. But yeah, I think my pieces just get into the game so quick. That said, now that I look at it, it was probably premature for him to resign. I mean, at least like here, if I move my bishop back, let's say, like I don't know, let's just say I play bishop d7. It's possible if he gets these pawns going, he can mount a defense. And my minor pieces might have a harder time attacking him. So, it's funny because I didn't even really look at the material count. I just assumed I was ahead on material this entire line. I was like, oh, I'm winning a piece, but he did gain 3 pawns from that transaction. 3 pawns are actually 4 pawns. You got 4 pawns, 2 on the queen side, and then my h and g pawns. But if we follow the engine line, I don't know, queen d2, let's say bishop h6, that's a good move, attacking the queen. This does become painful pretty fast. If e3, then he hangs the f3 pawn. Because if he loses 1 pawn in this row of pawns, he's probably just sunk. So f4, bishop h3. If rook f2, I assume knight g4 is very good. my pieces start worming their way into his position. So if white were to resign in that position, which he did resign, that's more an acknowledgement of black's threats and my piece activity rather than the material balance, because I'm not ahead in material. So yeah, I actually wish he would have continued a little bit. Nevertheless, I hope you guys enjoyed this game, and I'll be back tomorrow with another standard game. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good weekend. Bye.